Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. If you are watching this conversation, a like and a review would be nice. And if you're listening to it, the same applies. So today, my guest is David Suson. He's a trainer on sales, leadership, and personal performance. So, how did a guy who studied electrical and computer engineering get into these topics? And when did he ditch the pocket protector and go down this new path? So let's
Oh
let's
my. Oh
let's
my
tune
gosh. Hey,
in.
Neil.
Let's tune in to find out. So, welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, David.
Hey, well, Neil, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, I mentioned that you studied electrical and computer engineering. So, what was the motivation to study that?
Being a geek since I was probably in second grade, I was really good at math. I wasn't really good at writing and reading. That was not my strength, but I had this natural affinity to problem solving, and I started doing computer programming in elementary school. We used to go to Radio Shack, if you remember those, and they had this TRS-80, and my neighbor, who was about a year younger than I was, we'd walk over there and we'd write little basic computer programs. And I just fell in love with technology and knew I wanted to be an engineer.
Wow. I do remember Radio Shack. Quick story on Radio Shack has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But when I was in university, I went to Radio Shack because I wanted headphones. And I bought the cheap headphones that they sold at Radio Shack. And then luckily I bought the extended warranty. I had to go there multiple times to replace those headphones because they would stop playing out of one ear. And then I would just go back there and replace them. So I have fond memories of going to Radio Shack to get new headphones.
Too funny.
So I mentioned in the intro that you studied engineering, electrical and computer engineering,
I,
probably one of the more difficult engineering disciplines there are. But it seems like you didn't. I'm not sure if you worked in it for very long, but I mentioned in the intro that you do sales, leadership, and personal performance. So, what was the motivation to get into sales?
Frankly, I was in my junior year of high school, of college, and I had a meltdown, and I realized I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. And I persevered though. I got my degree in double E, and but I knew it's not what I wanted. They had a career day. Hewlett Packard was at the career day, and I went and talked to him, and I said, "Hey, is there an opportunity to do something and leverage my degree, but not be an engineer?" And they said, "Well, we have this thing called a systems engineer or sales engineer." And I go, "Well, what's that?" They said, "Well, what you do, you act as a liaison between the sales team and the client, and you kind of translate the technical stuff and, make it easy to understand." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that would be ideal. I would love that. I would never go into sales, but I would, and I don't want to be a double E. I don't want to be a programmer, but that seems like the best of both worlds." So I actually tried to get on with HP. I sent out in the Bay Area. I wanted to move to San Francisco or San Jose. Couldn't get hired. I probably sent out 50 resumes to companies. Timing wasn't good. I'm on campus. I'm really bummed out. And I see this little piece of paper up on a bulletin board, and it says interviews with IBM. And I'm like, all right, I'll go interview, number one, biggest computer company in the world at the time. And I go interview, and it was for a marketing rep job, marketing representative. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that is, but marketing is interesting to me. Well, it turns out it's a sales job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, sales. I'm an introvert. I'm relatively shy. I know nothing about sales. I, but I really wanted to push myself in my life and my career. And that was like 180 degrees from anything I would have ever normally done. And I said, you know what? I need to grow. And this is something I would never normally do. And it's probably stupid to do it, but how hard can it be? Right? I'm like, all you gotta do is consult with customers and, help them find a solution. So I went to work at IBM. I went in sales, and I fell in love with it. And that's kind of how I transitioned from engineering into a different world, and then eventually moved into sales leadership and a variety of other things.
Wow, that is a pretty interesting story, and I'm glad that in your junior year you figured out that engineering wasn't for you, but you finished the degree anyway. I mean, I'm guessing you're probably 3 years into it at least, and
Right.
if you're gonna, it would have been such a shame to stop and start all over. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that engineers are getting an engineering degree is way more versatile than people probably give it credit for. There are
Yeah.
people with engineering degrees that are doing all types of different jobs.
Right.
They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're engineers, obviously. Man, they also work in marketing and sales. Why not?
I have five brother-in-laws. They're all engineers. And then my father-in-law was also an engineer. Like, it is pervasive throughout it's so funny. But yeah.
Nice. You mentioned that you got into sales leadership. Was that something that was you were planning on doing, or something that kind of fell into your lap?
I was actually probably a little bit slow moving in. My buddies all got promoted. I didn't, and I hadn't seen myself as a leader at the time. So it really took a few years before I was ready. And I said, look, I'm ready for that next step, because I really believe that I have, while I was the top 1% in the United States in sales, I really believed that I had the ability to do more as a leader and to stretch and grow, because I knew I didn't just want to be in sales my whole life. I wanted to be able to impact others. So, a few years later, I had the opportunity to move into sales, and I started at I changed companies, and I was managing the Western United States. And that was my first sales opportunity, or my first sales leadership role.
The question I probably should have asked you before, but I'll ask now. How did your background in engineering help you in being in sales?
I think my advantage, especially because I was selling predominantly technology and software and SaaS solutions, it was the ability to communicate at any level in an organization. I was very fortunate. IBM, basically my first year at IBM, it was like getting an MBA. They teach you how to read financial statements. They teach you about money, leasing. They teach you about what CEOs and board members care about. It literally is like an MBA, and it was crazy. But so I understood how to communicate at different executive levels in organizations of all sizes. But then I also had that technical background, so I could communicate with users, I could communicate with the IT department. And I think the advantage I had over most salespeople is the credibility, because oftentimes they would think, oh, he's just a sales guy. And then they actually learned that I knew 12 programming languages. I had been in through double E. I understood finite element analysis. I understood technology typically better than most of my clients. And I didn't boast about it, but after a few conversations, they started thinking to themselves, oh, he's not a schmo. He like, this guy really knows his stuff. So I would lend credibility on the technical side, right? Either the users or the people implementing technology. But then because of my background and training, I could have communication at VP, C level. And I think that was really the advantage I had over most salespeople. And I don't know if you caught what I said. I was very shy and introverted early in my career. So I was not this, over the top, typical sales guy. I was like a project manager. I was more like a consultant. And so the way I came across was 180 degrees from most people that my customers had ever dealt with in their career. And that was a huge advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose people are put off by that whole used car salesman type of
Right.
persona. But if you come at them in more of a consultative way, just as a problem solver, which really is what engineering is all about, solving problems, then
Right.
maybe then they see you as somebody who is credible. As you mentioned,
Right.
this is somebody worth listening to. This isn't just somebody trying to sell us something. This is somebody that's actually trying to help us
So
solve whatever problem we have.
that's it. Solve a problem. And that was really the way I approached it, as opposed to, hey, I'm desperate to sell. It's I'm desperate to solve a problem. And keep in mind, people don't understand sales. We're doing 6-figure, 7-figure sales. Like we're talking $1 million, multi-million dollar sales. And so at that level, it's not one and done, manipulate and force. It truly is, how do we solve a problem? And you have these longer term relationships with your client or prospect. It's way different than, one and done. And one and done is, the guys that are knocking on your door at your house, they have one shot to sell you new windows, solar panels, bug, insect, whatever they call it, rodent control, insect control, or car sales. It's a different environment. And that's where the engineering background really benefited me.
I once heard the term sales acceleration. I probably should have done more research into what it meant, but just from hearing the term, it sounds like it means making it so that a sale can happen more quickly than maybe it would have. Is there a way? I mean, is that even something that is to be done, or do sales happen when the customer says they're going to happen?
Oh, that is such a good question. So I do a lot of training and speaking and consulting with sales executives and salespeople, and a lot of leadership development. That idea of sales acceleration, a lot of people will say their belief is it happens at the customer's pace. Sometimes that's true. When I did federal government, you're only going to go as fast as the funding. And if they don't have funding until October 1st, it doesn't matter how badly they want it. They literally cannot encumber those funds or use those funds. So that's definitely true, right? The, the opposite of that I'll share is the bigger the problem, the faster a sale moves. And the analogy I use is this. If you're in the middle of the summer, it's 110 degrees, you're living in Phoenix or Las Vegas, and your air conditioning in your car or air conditioning in your house breaks, you're going to find a way to get the money to fix it, and you're going to do it now. If you live in the part of the country where it's sub-zero, right? You're in Minnesota or North Dakota or something, and your heaters go out in your house, you are going to find money. You are going to find a way to get that thing fixed right away. Here's the funny thing. How oftentimes we will say, well, I don't have money for a vacation. I don't have money for the new car. I don't have money for this and this. But man, when that furnace breaks, you somehow have money, don't you? So what accelerates the sale is how big the pain is. And that's what I focus a lot on, is helping people understand, how do we really find that pain so that it becomes a high priority? Because it's not always a high priority in their mind right now. And that's the real nuance of learning how to do well in sales, is how do I elevate that need and that urgency? And that's what it comes down to. And there's so much more complicated than that, because when you're talking 6-figure deals, 7-figure deals, now you have multiple people involved. You've got legal, you've got, finance, you've got IT, you've got end users, and now everyone has their hand in the pot. So now the secret is, how do I make sure I'm addressing all of their needs, but their pain and their urgency, so everyone that touches it says, oh, you're right. This is a broken furnace. We got to take care of it right now. It wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't a priority, but now I see how important it is. And that's the real nuance. And most people aren't very good at that. They don't have the right kind of training. So they just do quote and hope, or show up and throw up, which means, they just show up, they just vomit everything they know about their product. They send a proposal, they cross their fingers. And guess what? Eventually the customer probably does buy. But that's in that time frame, the customer's time frame. How do we get it done in this time frame? And that's the real secret. That's the nuance.
Interesting. if let's just say in a perfect world, all salespeople knew how to frame whatever they're selling as the furnace, then how will a company know which furnace to buy first? How will they be able to prioritize?
What a great question. So, this is a much longer answer to really address it, but I'll give you kind of the quick and dirty on it. The better I can define what the real problem is and why our product or our solution addresses it, the more likely they're going to buy our solution. So the example I think about is what most customers do is they say, for example, these are the 5 things that are most important to me. This is what most customers do. And most salespeople say, oh, well, I can do all 5 of those. Well, guess what? 20 other companies can do those 5 things also. So if you have 20 companies that can do that, how is the customer going to make a decision? Probably price. But if I can help the customer understand that while you're right, those 5 things are important, did you consider the other 20 things, the blind spots, and help them understand that these other 20 things are why we are a company. It's why we built the product we built, because we have visibility into hundreds or thousands of companies and the problems they're having. So we built our product around these 25 or 30 problems. And you didn't even realize, you didn't think about it because those were blind spots to you. You hadn't considered, oh, you know what? That's true. I didn't consider that could be a problem down the road. Oh, I didn't consider that that would be an issue. I didn't consider that would be an issue. So now what I do is I elevate the decision criteria and I define the criteria better than anyone else by educating the client. And now all of a sudden, the criteria is 25 or 30 things. And I know I'm the only one that can do it. And now they buy from me. And if I can really give them a return on their investment, they're willing to pay a lot more. I've sold solutions that were 10 times the nearest competitor's price. So $250,000 versus 25,000, and they bought from me. And people go, how do you do that? I'm like, because my $250,000 solution actually makes them money. Whereas the $25 solution does the job. And there's a huge difference between doing the job and actually making you money. And I'll give you a quick analogy. Let's say you wanted to buy stock and it's only $5. Next year, it's going to be worth $5.10. It's cheap. The stock is cheap. You could buy a lot of stock for $5, right? But in a year, it's only worth $5.10. Or I have $1,000 stock and next year it's worth $10,000. Now, which one are you going to buy? Do you buy cheap, but you have no ROI, or do you invest more, but you know you're going to get a 10x return? Well, most people would say, hey, if it's guaranteed, I will find a way to get the $1,000 knowing it's a guaranteed 10x return. That's really the nuance in selling, is you're not selling on price. You're selling on the ROI. How's it going to make us money? And that's what most people, a lot of reps that I coach and the companies I work with, they don't know how to message and articulate that.
Interesting. Yeah, certainly. Greater ROI, sign me up. I also mentioned in the intro, David, that you do personal performance. So what does personal performance entail?
Well, you teach the geek, right? We talk about public speaking. Personal performance is, how do I, as an individual, whether I'm in a leadership role or a individual contributor or, a geek, I'm an engineer, and I want to grow my skills. I either want to be more confident. I want to learn to be more decisive, not so wishy-washy. Maybe I want to move into a leadership role. Public speaking, even, people, maybe it's not as a career, but they're just like, hey, I wish I was more confident so that I could lead a group. I think you have a project management background. You have PMP also, right? besides
That's
being
right.
an engineer, right?
Mm.
So I'm going to be speaking at a PMI, one of the state chapters for PMI, and it's personal performance is helping people build that confidence to be better leaders, more decisive, have greater authority. That's what I mean by personal performance, and it can be in a variety of areas, right? Could be leadership, could be sales, just confidence, overcoming, self-doubt. It could be overcoming, if you've heard of you or the listeners have heard of the idea of imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is what holds most people back. I don't know. I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not good enough to be that, right? Personal performance means, how do I get over that? Things like that.
Got it. Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned public speaking in this podcast and YouTube channel. It's all about public speaking.
Mhm.
So when it comes to just speaking in front of people, public speaking generally, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what'd you do to get better at it?
All right, I laugh because okay, so I'm my second year of college, and one of the things we had to do was go up and give like a 5-minute presentation in front of the entire class. So I'm preparing. I'm so nervous the night before. I hated public speaking. I hated the spotlight on me ever since I was a kid. I never would have been in a play. I never would be in a role where at school where people would look at me. I pretty much hid in the back of the room and was very quiet and shy and introverted. And so I'm having to do this presentation in college, and the whole time I'm just waiting for my turn. My heartbeat is pounding, 120 beats a minute. It's like and I can just feel, I can even see my shirt moving. And in fact, I didn't hear anything that was going on before me. I was so nervous planning my presentation. So I get up in front of the class in college, and I couldn't talk. The words came out like this: I'm here today to, and after a couple of minutes, the professor, I mean, I froze. All the blood rushed, to my heart. Was pounding. I turned white. The professor comes over and just taps me on the shoulder. He says, "Go ahead and sit down." I was embarrassed. I was mortified. The rest of the class, I just sat there. I didn't hear a word. I went back to my dorm and I passed out on the bed. I was so embarrassed. So fast forward, it's my second year at IBM. This is years, 4 or 5 years later. And my my boss says to me, "Hey, Dave, I want you to send out emails to all of our customers. I want you to invite them into our customer center, and I want you to do this presentation for them." And I'm like, okay, it's like a PowerPoint thing. So that I couldn't sleep the night before. I was just having nightmares of when I was in college and how badly I did. And so my boss calls me, and it's like 7 in the morning, and he says, "Dave, I'm so sorry. I can't be there for your presentation." I'm saying, Steve, I'm so sorry you can't be there. And he says, "I want to just wish you luck." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you so much." I hang up the phone. I immediately call one of my other coworkers I work with, and I go, "I can't do it. I can't do this presentation. I am freaking out. I'm sweating. I can't talk. I can't do it. You got to bail me out." And he did. And he did the presentation for me. I never told my boss. I never told anyone. And I was so afraid I was going to get fired. And I had the opportunity a couple of months later to take a class on speaking. And I took this course, and I forced myself. There's a quote that says, "If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you." But I was so afraid I would not have a career at IBM or anywhere if I couldn't learn to do a presentation. And I forced myself, as painful as it was, to get up in front of 20 people and every week have to do a presentation. And after a few weeks of speaking regularly, even though I was so nervous, I actually started to enjoy it. And then I got better and I got better and I got better. And then what happened was at work, I had the opportunity to invite customers in again. And this time I actually wanted to do it. And I was nervous, but there was something in me that actually enjoyed it. Being up on stage, being the authority, so to speak. And then from that point forward, I kept looking for new opportunities to force myself to be in front of and up on stage, or the platform, as they say, to doing it. And I fell in love with it. And then a number of years later, I sat down and I said, what do I want to do the rest of my life? So this is in 2000, 2001, 2002. And I said, if I could do anything, I would be a professional speaker full time. And what I would do is motivate and inspire and create paradigm shifts. And that's what I've been doing the last 15 years of my career. I travel all over the world as a keynote speaker.
Wow, that's great. And Steve, if you're listening or watching this episode, the secret's out. David never did that presentation all them years ago. Hopefully you're not mad. That's wonderful. Well, David, if for the people who are watching and listening to this episode, Steve included, if you had a one tip that you'd want to give people on getting better at giving presentations or public speaking generally, what would it be?
May I give you just a couple?
Sure, I'm not gonna tell you no.
All right. I'm going to, so number one, the first thing is you got to know your why you want to be better at public speaking. You know, Simon Sinek talks about this. What's your motivator? Mine, frankly, initially was just keep my job. And then it was, I knew this could advance my life, my career. And it is one of the secrets of why I was so successful in my career, because I was willing to put myself in front of large groups, and you have more authority and influence when you do it. So that's number one. Number two, you got to be willing to accept the pain and the challenge. You have to force yourself. It's not natural for a lot of people. So you have to know that it's going to be uncomfortable up front. But the thing that I want to share is a real tip. And there's two components to a tip. If you were you ever heard the phrase, Neil, dance like no one's watching?
Yes.
You ever heard that phrase? So the idea is, if you're on the dance floor, dance like no one's watching, because if no one's watching you, you would just dance. And an example of this would be, if you're in your house, you have no mirrors and no one could see you, you literally could walk around and just be goofy, and knowing no one's watching you, no one's judging you, you would do it. Well, one of the secrets with speaking is talk like no one's watching. Because here's what happens. When we go to speak, the reason most people can't speak is they are nervous, or they worry that they're going to forget something, or they're nervous or worried that someone's going to judge them or know more than them. So what they're doing is, instead of being present in the moment, their brain is actively thinking, what could go wrong? And they have this negative expectation. So the way I like to think of it is, instead of you being in the moment, focused on your words, you're thinking of what they're thinking. So now you're trying to get the brain to do two things at once. You're trying to get the brain to say your words, but your brain is thinking what they're thinking. And it's impossible for the brain to truly do two things at once. You can't do it. But think of our conversation right now. In this conversation, none of it has been scripted for you nor me. So how are the right words coming out? Well, they're coming out because I'm letting the brain do what it does best. It just works when you let it. But if I am worried about what you're going to say, if I'm worried about saying the right thing, the problem is now I'm trying to get the brain to do two things at once. I cannot talk and think about them at the same time. So it's all about being present. And this is something I work with people on, is how do you become present? How do you minimize the thought that they're judging you, right? How do you talk like no one's watching? How do you dance like no one's watching? How do you cut that out and just be present? So that's the first thought. The second thing that I like to do, that you can try, anyone can try right now, like today, starting today, listen to your speech, and do you fill the space with ums and ahs? Most people do. Most people cannot do what I'm doing right now, which is pausing without saying and And so one of the things that I'll encourage all of you to do, anyone who's listening today, make a commitment for the next day, 2 days, 3 days, that whenever you talk, force yourself to pause and be comfortable in the silence. And it's really awkward when you first do it. But if you keep practicing, and you can do it with your spouse, you can do it with your significant other, you can do it with a friend, you can literally talk and just stop mid-sentence and get used to silence. And it's one of the tips that I teach people, how to get rid of uhs and ums. Because that's why we say and we feel like we have to, okay, I gotta, while I'm thinking, So those are 2 tips, right? The silence, and then just try to be present, try to be in the moment and not think about what could go wrong, right? Negative expectation, those are 2 things that you can try.
Wonderful. This has been a great conversation, David. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Easiest way to do it is probably you can go to my website, which is davidsuson.com. That's DAVIDSUSON. There's a contact me page there. Or my email, my primary email I use is, well, I've got 2, but david@davidsuson.com. And again, DAVIDSUSON.com. And you can email or go to my website.
Excellent. Well, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. You can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, David.
Hey, Neil, thank you.